So about 80% of homeowners right now have a mortgage rate that's under 4%. And so the number one question that I get in talking with mediators and attorneys and stuff, the number one question they receive when it comes to staying in the marital home or someone keeping the marital home is, how do I keep my current mortgage? How do I get an assumption or a release of liability so I can hold on to my mortgage that's in the twos or the threes, which is completely understandable. Like, why would you want to go and refinance to a much higher interest rate? Now, what's important to understand is there are some, unfortunately, we live in a world where, economics kind of rule the day. There's no money in assumptions. Bank may charge a couple $100 for it, but really there's no, nobody makes any money if you're doing an assumption or releasing somebody else from the liability of that mortgage contract. And so getting information about it is really hard to come by. So I hope that you find this helpful. There's a couple of important things for you to understand when it comes to the assumption process and how everything works. And the first thing is that a mortgage is different than a checking account or a savings account or a brokerage account, in that the loan servicer that you're making your payments to, they don't actually hold your mortgage. They're just collecting the payments on it and managing the escrow account if you have one. Those payments of the interest, that's being passed on to investors. So when you got your mortgage, it was sold to on the secondary market. Typically, if it's a conventional mortgage, it gets sold to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are aggregators. They take mortgages, they pool them together, they securitize them through Wall Street, and then they sell them as bonds to investors. Now, I can go down the road here to Vanguard and I can buy shares in a mutual fund or an exchange traded fund that invests solely in Fannie and Freddie mortgages. Or I can get one that invests solely in FHA mortgages, a Ginnie Mae fund. And so when you want to change that mortgage contract, you want to remove one person from the equation, that lender has to go to the investor or investors who hold part of your mortgage and get their approval. And so for some lenders, they just won't do it. They just are not going to go through the process and the headache of doing that. So the first order of business is to see if your lender even allows it. So give them a call, ask them if they allow for an assumption or a release of liability in the case of divorce. And they'll either tell you yes or no. Now, if they say yes, they will get you they'll either email you or mail you out a package with a list of instructions and requirements. And you can start putting things together and getting an idea and ask them, what the process is. If they say no, then it's, you're gonna have to come up with plan B. But if it is yes, you want to review the process. Now, the biggest stumbling block that people have with these that I've seen over the last year or two is not so much that people don't qualify. Now, when they're qualifying you, they have, you'll go through underwriting. It's a manual underwrite. Manual underwrites are going to be more strict. I mean, I've had people where I've been able to qualify them very easily for a refinance, but manually they just weren't able to do it. So the debt ratios are a lot more strict, a lot more tight. When you're removing an income earner, sometimes that ratio goes up too high and it's not going to work. If you're relying on child support alimony to qualify, you're going to have a tough time with an assumption. If you have any kind of a second mortgage on the house, you're probably going to run into a roadblock, because when you change the deed stuff, that changes the lien position for the lenders. The biggest issue, though, that I've seen is that it's just a question of time. So it normally can take 60 to 90 days to go and get the approval from the investors. The problem is up front, the requirements are going to add to that. So oftentimes I've seen where some loan service will require that you show that you've made 6 payments on your own. They will almost all require a divorce decree. It could take a couple of months to get a divorce decree. So these can take 6, 9, 12 months to do. And oftentimes you just don't have that time. Time is not always your friend when you're going through a divorce process. And what ends up happening often is that people just get fatigued with having to go back to their other spouse or the other counsel and just say, like, we got to push this another 30 or 60 days and push it yet again. when people want to get off of the mortgage or they want to get an equity buyout. When you want to do an equity buyout, that changes things as well, because if you're going to keep the current mortgage, say you have a mortgage rate that's going to be 3.5, and you have to do a 50 or 75 or whatever, an equity buyout, you need some of the equity in the house. You're going to have to go out and get a mortgage rate. Right now, those second mortgage rates are going to be 9, 10, 11%. And so it doesn't always make sense. It's not like it reduces the benefit of being able to keep that first mortgage. So if you go down to the other module here about equity buyouts, you can kind of see the comparisons that we can put together. Typically, if you're going to do some kind of an equity buyout, from a cash flow perspective, from a monthly payment perspective, more often than not, it doesn't make sense to keep the current mortgage. So if your lender allows it, they're going to send you instructions. Take a look at those instructions. If you have questions about it, I often work as kind of like a consultant for people who are going through the assumption process. They have questions and stuff. I'm happy to take a look at them. It's always interesting to see what other lenders are requiring and stuff. So feel free to reach out if there's anything I can do for you. Again, I'm a free resource. You can schedule a 15 or 30-minute call with me. I can help walk you through what to ask for, answer any questions that you have, or review your assumption requirements to see if that's an option for you. Thanks.